Welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Byron Hepburn. I'm the director of the Military Health Institute here at UT Health San Antonio, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to be recording this workshop so that you can share it with your colleagues in the months and years ahead. So this will be the first of many workshops we'll be doing at the MHI, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the DoD research process and all the great opportunities it'll bring you. Today we're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Alan Peterson, who is our Associate Director for Research at our institute, but is also leading the Strong Start Consortium and the Consortium to Alleviate PTSD with a great team that he's built over years. He's got a deep toolkit in DoD funded research. Also with us today is recently named Dr. Micah Wright, who's our program manager, who's has had a distinguished career in the United States Marine Corps. And as a Purple Heart recipient, he's going to talk to us a little bit about the DoD as well. We'll go over a little bit about what the MHI is, just so you know what it is, but more importantly, why we're doing this research for the military and the uniformed services composition, the different services, and what they're doing for our nation. And then over to Dr. Peterson, he'll go over the DoD research organization structure, and he'll give you some pearls on how to make your grant successful, your proposal successful when you submit. And then we'll finish up with a little bit of the support activity that we can provide for you as you're moving through the DoD process. Our Military Health Institute was established here at UT Health San Antonio in 2014. So here we are in almost our 8th year of service to the university, and we serve all the schools, centers, and institutes of the university with a lot of their activity in research, education, and clinical care. The primary pillar, though, is research. We want to make sure that our university is actively engaged with our DoD, our Department of Defense, and also our VA in their research activity. And the reason why we're doing this research is that photo there is Sergeant Shiloh Harris, who was severely injured in Iraq and also severely burned. But his beautiful daughter there, he lives today because of the research that was done previously to keep him alive, but also to make his life better. And that's why we're doing this work. What will the MHI do for you? We're going to talk about these points in depth over the next several minutes, but we first off want to make sure all of you are aware of what opportunities are out there. And let me just say this right now. There are these urban legends that DoD research is not equivalent or on par with NIH-funded research. The president of the university and our Dean Romas have fully stated that DoD research is quality, peer-reviewed research, and we fully endorse that research. So we want to make sure you're aware of those opportunities, and we're going to do that for you. We're going to be mentoring you on the grant process, and we'll talk about that during this session. We'll connect you with colleagues here in San Antonio and even in Washington, D.C. if necessary, that will help you with your research. And then we'll actually do some deep dives on your grant proposals and provide letters of endorsement if needed. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wright right now to give you a little bit of a background on our armed services, our uniformed services. Over to you, Dr. Wright.
Thank you, Dr. Hepburn. Right, so thinking about our uniformed services, our uniformed branches is really important when you're submitting DoD funding, because different grants will come from different services and relate to those services. So understanding what services we have is incredibly important. Now, if you look at the slide, it says that we have 8 uniformed branches. What's important to focus on is that the top one where it says Department of Defense, those are armed services. A lot of the research comes out of this, especially through the Department of the Army. So focusing on this is important. We have almost 1.5 million, a little bit over, total service members. If you think of the impact that that has, now double it, thinking about the family that they have. The amount of people, the amount of research that goes into it, the amount of impact that you can make through these different branches is incredible. So each uniformed service has a different mission, and understanding those missions will help you with the grants. Understanding what each branch is trying to get out of their funding and their research is incredibly important. For example, if you look at the Army, traditionally, they're a land force. They go and they occupy land, but the Marines and the Navy, you're going to see that they're a maritime force. and they do a lot of naval stuff. So thinking about their impact is going to be a little bit different than the Army. And as you work with MHI, we're glad to help you understand the service that you are applying to and understand what their readiness is and understand what their capabilities are. So a lot of this boils down to understanding medical readiness, thinking about how important this research is to the different branches. Why are they using it? Right? I was a Marine. Our readiness has to do with combat. We want to make sure that everybody is prepared to deploy and to be effective in combat. If you look at the Air Force, they want to make sure that everybody's ready to deploy, but they have superiority within the air. The Navy, they want to have superiority on the sea for their maritime force. Readiness, a word that you will see within the grants that you apply to, is going to be directly related to what that service needs. So here's some key terms to remember. A common mistake that is made in writing about different services and applying to different grants is that we try to generalize everybody into one service. As a Marine, I've been called soldier a few times, and although I'm not offended by it, it's a great title. Knowing what these different titles are for the different branches will help you key in to who you're applying to, your audience, but it's also going to help you with your ethos, with your credibility, because it'll show that you know the branch that you're applying to. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Alan Peterson now, and he's going to go over DoD Research Organization.
Thanks. All right, gotta go the right direction.
Yeah, there you go.
There
you go.
All right, just a quick introduction of myself and my background, just to kind of set the stage for the presentation today. So I'm actually a retired Air Force clinical psychologist. Actually did my training here in San Antonio, did my internship and a postdoctoral fellowship at what at the time was called Wilford Hall Medical Center, now called Wilford Hall Ambulatory Surgical Center. So did my initial training here in San Antonio, was stationed at a variety of locations all around the country while I was on active duty, was deployed on 9/11 for the first time of my career, did 3 deployments, and that gave me a good idea about some of the concerns and risks and what the research gaps were related to healthcare in the Department of Defense. I retired, moved over here to the University of Texas Health Science Center in 2005. And I've been here since that time. I'm the director of the Division of Behavioral Medicine at the Health Science Center. We're really focusing on behavioral, psychological, life stress, behaviors that are related to a variety of medical conditions. So we do research and provide clinical work here at the university, and then also within the Department of Psychiatry. So that's my main appointment in the department. As Dr. Hepburn mentioned, I'm the director of the Strong Start Consortium and the Consortium to Alleviate PTSD. I also have an appointment out at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and we're often confused, right? The medical school here, the dental school, the School of Nursing, the University of Texas Health Science Center. We work closely with UTSA as a separate university. There are lots of opportunities to collaborate with individuals there as well. There's got a lot more individuals here at our Health Science Center that's collaborating with the military, but there's some things that UTSA has that we don't have, and so they're also potentially a good partner with us. And then obviously we're in a location where we're a close partner with our VA. Here's the South Texas Veterans Healthcare System, and much research within the DoD. They really like it if you can have an active duty military population that's involved. It's often suitable or acceptable to also maybe have a VA population if your particular project kind of fits with the VA. And then you can also study civilians as well. But ideally, if you can work with active duty, that it just makes a much more fundable project, if you will, because it directly meets the needs of what the military is interested in. The Strong Start Consortium, not to go into lots of details here, but we're located here at the UT Health Science Center. We're actually a large nationwide research consortium, so we work with many universities, many investigators around the country. Have been doing lots of research now for over a decade. A lot of it has been in the area of post-traumatic stress disorder, but I think it's better described as psychological health. We do work with traumatic brain injuries, substance use disorders, chronic pain, a variety of sleep disorders. So really the psychological health aspect of the military is really the area that we work most closely in. We're also doing some work with enhancing resiliency. That's kind of a big area recently within the military. And there's lots of opportunities here in San Antonio for getting more involved in research that is really focused on how do we enhance resilience. The military is really interested in enhancing resilience in the active duty forces. Obviously, there's also interest in first responders, those types of individuals. Even in civilians, there's interest in that. So when we do DoD research, the DoD is primarily interested in active duty service members, but oftentimes they want their research to translate or be applicable to veterans, for example, and also, if possible, to have applicability for the large civilian population. If you think about vaccine development and that type of thing, much of the work that's been done in the past was done within the DoD, and then it ends up having applications for our nation as well. Lots of institutions around the country, lots of investigators that we're involved in, and a real expertise that we have is doing human clinical trials with active duty military. Been very busy over the past decade or so. We've had over 300 grant applications that we've submitted. Actually, right now, we're at a point where there's a new announcement that's out that is the biggest announcement for psychological health research that's been around for about a decade or so. And so we actually are collaborating with many investigators and institutions around the country to be submitting grant applications. Actually, I have about 15 grants that are going in about 2.5 weeks. So we are incredibly busy right now. So again, there's a lot of different types of research. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. Most of the research that I do is psychological health, human clinical trial research. And from my perspective, I think it's very, very important. Obviously, it's what leads oftentimes to changes in the clinical practice guidelines. But there's also lots of basic science, preclinical research. The DoD is actually very interested in that as well. I have less expertise in that area. We do have investigators and individuals that are consulting with the MHI that have expertise in kind of the basic science, preclinical area. So there's lots of research that's funded in that area as well. The DoD can be complicated, and so that's part of what we're wanting to focus on today, or trying to help you understand a little bit about the DoD. Many of the investigators here at the Health Science Center are very accustomed to NIH-funded research, and obviously there's a lot of things that overlap between the NIH and the DoD, but there's also some unique pieces that are very different. Keep in mind, we're in San Antonio, the military city USA. So really, there's 3 main cities in the United States that really are primed to collaborate with DoD research. One is San Antonio. That's obviously a big one. San Diego has got a big Navy and Marine contingency that's there, so there's lots of DoD funded research going on there. And then in Washington, D.C. as well. I would argue that really the San Antonio military city USA has, I think, more opportunities than any other city in the nation for collaborating with the DoD. Many centers of excellence, many institutes and whatnot that are here. So there really are some incredible opportunities here in San Antonio. Military Health Institute was stood up a number of years ago really to kind of expand the research. The area I've worked in is in psychological health. I would say that's probably 10% maybe of what the overall research that goes on within the DoD. So there's another 90% or so of different things that are out there that the Military Health Institute really is prepared to help individuals to expand, to get new research, to work in all of these other areas of research, and in particular, military health clinical research with humans is another piece that the DoD is very interested in. We've got lots of opportunities for those here in San Antonio. Important to understand the kind of the culture that you're working with. So there is the Medical Research and Development Command. So this is has been headquartered at Fort Detrick in Maryland, and really been the prime leader of the largest percentage of DoD research over the years. Each of the branches has their own research funding. The Air Force, the Navy, Marines, Special Forces have got pockets of money that's always important to be looking at as well. But overall, the biggest bolus of research really has been through what's called the Medical Research and Development Command. There's a nice website you can go to. If you just look up CDMRP, for example, you can get to a website that has lots of information. You can spend literally hours on that website understanding more about the different funding opportunities, what the DoD has done in the past. So that's a website I would encourage you to go and look at. So again, military medicine is the focus, and it really starts from early on when people are initially recruited into the military, kind of across a person's military lifespan, and sometimes that's 20 plus years, sometimes that's 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then transitioning into the VA. So there's different types of research that may focus on different aspects of the military lifespan that may occur. A number of areas of research focus that the DoD has. One is infectious disease, and obviously over the past couple of years, we know how important that is. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of research previously and even currently has come out of the military related to infectious disease. That's one area that I think we have not fully capitalized here in San Antonio, with lots of opportunity for even more infectious disease work. So there's a real a gap, as far as I'm concerned, of opportunities that are available in that area. Combat casualty care, those that are familiar with San Antonio, we've got the Institute for Surgical Research, we've got the burn unit, there's lots of tertiary care, healthcare that takes place here in San Antonio, part of Brooke Army Medical Center or San Antonio Military Medical Center, or the Armed Services Healthcare System that exists. There's these terms that I'm not going to go into details on now, but it can easily get confusing related to the different terms. Again, the MHI is a great place to help understand what all of these acronyms and abbreviations and the relationships that occur. I'm not going to go into lots of details, but there's a new thing that's been stood up recently called the Defense Health Agency, which is trying to bring in all of the healthcare within the military under one umbrella. That has added, I think, a lot of confusion to people that are doing work in the area. We're confused ourselves at times related to that, but again, the MHI can help sort through some of those challenges and understanding how the Department of Defense's healthcare system really is in a process of change, if you will. Military operational medicine really is what is required to keep people operationally ready and fit to, again, deploy, to do the mission that they're asked to do within the military. Chemical, biological defense, there's research in that area. Haven't had much of us to be concerned about, but obviously if you look at the threats that are occurring all around the country, there's always the risk of a threat of a biological or chemical attack and whatnot. So we're always being trying to be ahead of the curve, if you will, with research on how to be helping out in those areas. And the final piece is kind of clinical rehabilitative medicine. So the clinical aspects of military medicine, the rehabilitation aspects. You often think that rehab happens in the VA, but a lot of that does start here, in San Antonio and with active duty military. Those of you may be familiar with the Center for the Intrepid, for example, here in San Antonio. Lots of rehabilitation takes place. If possible, we would like to rehabilitate individuals to allow them to remain on active duty and to continue to function. And for some specialties within the military, there's sometimes millions of dollars that's invested into someone to train them up to do their specialty. And if they've had an injury of some sort, to lose them can be a huge cost to the military as far as retraining an individual. So there's lots of clinical work, rehabilitation, rehab medicine that's done to try to keep people fit and functioning on active duty whenever that's possible. Lots of acronyms here. So another thing that's referred to a lot is JPC, JPC1, JPC5. You'll hear these terms a lot. This slide is a good way to help interpret what some of those things mean. Basically, there's different groupings of research, if you will, that kind of fall under kind of some clinical research areas. And those are what we call the joint programmatic committees that exist. Most of the work I do is called JPC5, Military Operational Medicine Research. That's human research focused on, again, maintaining a fit fighting force, if you will. Combat casualty care, if you think about individuals that are doing trauma work, our trauma surgeons here, university hospitals, level 1 trauma care, the level 1 trauma that is over at Brooke Army Medical Center. Those are examples of some of the combat casualty care work that's done. Again, a lot of other areas that are there, but if you look into the JPCs, that'll give you an idea about research, and sometimes each of these JPCs have their own program announcements that come out, so that'll be part of what you're looking at. Depending on what your specialty is, there might be one of these JPCs that is most pertinent to the work that you're doing. CDMRP, that's another word that's used a lot, the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. There's a long history behind the CDMRP. A real brief synopsis of it is that Congress at one point really wanted to move some of the national federal research dollars into the DoD because they felt like there were some opportunities to maybe kind of leapfrog ahead a little bit of the science that's there, maybe do some things that are more high risk, high reward. And the military really is a place that would benefit from the research that is kind of speeding up that research, if you will. Those of you that are accustomed to NIH research, it's kind of a slow, iterative process that may take a long time for there to be some big changes to take place. If you look at my research, for example, the work that I've done with post-traumatic stress disorder, there's no way that I could be where I'm at right now, 20 years after 9/11, if we had to rely just on NIH funding. We had to leapfrog a lot ahead of some of the science there to do some of the research that we felt like needed to be done. DoD was very willing to fund that, even though we had to kind of move a little bit ahead of science in order to do some of the clinical trials we did. So there's lots of opportunities to do innovative types of things. Sometimes it's a bit more high risk, more potential high reward that goes with that, but that's a real advantage of the DoD research. So started out really with cancer research, in particular breast cancer research. Seems strange. Why would the DoD be interested in breast cancer research? I didn't know there were so many people with breast cancer in the military. It's really not necessarily that there's people in the military with breast cancer, but it was a first step towards allowing breast cancer researchers, if you will, to again push the envelope, do some innovative things, maybe move faster ahead than what would be the type of research that might happen within the NIH, if you will. Over the years, that has been expanded. So the CDMRP now has research in many, many different areas. There's still a huge area every year related to cancer research, many different types of cancer research. So that's continued on, but the portfolio has grown tremendously over the past several decades. As far as the research that the CDMRP is involved in. There's often funding that gets started through interest of Congress. So there's often individuals in Congress that are listening to their constituents and aware of what are the big gaps that may exist and where's an area where we may need more research funding. So sometimes that happens through congressional means, and then there's appropriations that come with that. And then those are then going over to the DoD to address some of the research gaps that may exist in those areas. With the research review, there's a couple different types of reviews that take place. The DoD actually has two initial pieces. One is they do a thing called a pre-proposal. So when there's a grant application, the first piece is a smaller application, and the grants we're working on right now, for example, it's a 3-page pre-proposal. So basically describing the narrative or the main research strategy you have in just a 3-page document. So it's very tight and concise. A few other documents go along with that, but the first review by the DoD is, does that topic seem like a topic that we might be potentially interested in? There's a review of those, a programmatic review, and then individuals are invited for a full proposal. The full proposal is much similar to a full NIH grant application, but the nice thing that happens, at least I think it's nice, is that that initial review, there may be 100 applications that go in, for example, and it might be that first review they get maybe 50 of them are triaged out, or maybe, I'll say 50 or so might be triaged out, if you will. And so what ends up happening is maybe 50 are then invited for a full proposal. If you're invited for a full proposal, already the likelihood of you getting funding is already much higher, because a lot of the applications have already been eliminated. Now that you're in the hunt potentially for funding. And then when you're dedicating all the amount of time that goes into a full proposal, like an NIH proposal, you realize that your investment of time and energy, the likely payoff is much higher because you've already made it across that first hurdle, if you will. So there's a scientific peer review that takes place, very similar to NIH. Assuming that you get a good scientific score, it then goes to the programmatic review, where there's individuals that are leaders within the DoD, especially in these different joint programmatic committees and whatnot. They're the ones that make the final decision. If you have a really poor scientific score, the likelihood of being picked up is actually very, very low. The flip side is you can have a really good scientific score, but if it's in an area that is not really of much interest to the DoD, it's possible to not get picked up even with a good scientific score. So the goal is to try to do both, right? The goal is to try to have a really good science, a really good scientific review, but also to have a project that is directly related to the needs of the military, and then you kind of marry both of those pieces together. Lots of details online related to how this was done congressionally, the funding that came through the CDMRP over time. The other piece that has been happening at NIH as well that's becoming more common within the DoD as well is to have consumer involvement. So when the grants are reviewed, there's actually a often called a lived experience individual. So someone that may have experienced PTSD themselves, for example, or may have had a severe medical injury or a burn, for example, that are part of the process of reviewing both scientifically and then provide input from the programmatic review as well. So that's a new piece. Some of the new funding announcements really want a heavy emphasis on a community advisory board, for example, that would be advising your research, or a lived experience consultant that kind of works with you, hopefully across the entire grant process, to provide their input on the research ideas that you have. And oftentimes these are individuals that have a lived experience with the military, either as a service member or maybe as a family member, if you will. So this next slide, it's a bit busy, but basically if you look at the slide, this shows you the wide portfolio that the Department of Defense has. Again, most of the work that I've done is work that has direct military relevance, and so that's the type of research that I've done. But you can look on here and see there's autism. Again, I had mentioned breast cancer before, epilepsy, kidney cancer. There's lots of areas that are potentially open for research funding. You can get DoD funding. You can do that at the Health Science Center here in your lab, whether it's a basic science project or even a human project. You can do it with your own patients, if you will. If you can take one of those areas, at least with human research, and link it to the military somehow by making these connections with people locally or nationally in the military, it really does strengthen your application significantly. So there's some of these areas, obviously, in which military burn, for example, where there's the DoD burn unit is right here in San Antonio. So there's direct application. If you can partner with the burn unit on research, you're much more likely to get picked up for funding. Again, each of these areas you would need to look at it, some of which there are people already doing research within the military. There's other times where that's not the case, and the DoD is still willing to fund important research, even if it doesn't involve military populations. Another little bit of a complicated slide, but just to walk you through this a little bit, I mentioned the congressional appropriation. So a lot of this research starts with a congressional appropriation, and some of these have been going on for decades and decades, and cancer area is a good example. So there's a congressional appropriation. Then there are what's called stakeholder meetings. And so the DoD will invite investigators from around the country to be involved in meetings. I was involved in earlier this year. There was basically a 2-day meeting to go through and try to identify what the needs are in a particular research area, to provide the DoD with some scientific feedback, if you will, to help them then craft their program announcement. So at the end of that, there'll be what's called vision setting. Then there'll be a program announcement that comes out that basically gives all the details related to a particular research opportunity that exists. I kind of walk through the other part. There's a pre-proposal, then the full proposal, peer review, programmatic review. Assuming you're fortunate and you get picked up for funding, then you go through the funding cycle that exists, where there's the negotiation that takes place, the funding that takes place. A unique thing that it's not been happening recently because of COVID, but for most projects, there is a once a year meeting called an in-progress review, where the PI usually will go to Fort Detrick in many cases, where they'll meet in front of a panel. They also have their peers that are there. So other research projects that are funded in a similar area, all of those projects will be invited to go to Fort Detrick for 1, 2, or 3 days. And each PI will kind of give a brief review of their project. They then have an opportunity to get feedback not only from their peers, but also from a programmatic committee that the DoD has advised. Oftentimes when people get stuck with a project, it's a way to get some extra input or whatnot, and kind of redesign projects if they're stumbling or whatnot. So that's kind of what that cycle goes like. Hopefully at the end of that, you're working on the scientific presentations and publications, and in some cases you're actually working on changing clinical practice guidelines depending on the research that you're doing. So funding announcements, again, the CDMRP has a lot of the funding announcements. The Military Health Institute is really trying to track these as well and make sure that when these announcements come out, that there's emails that go out to departments and to schools and whatnot, so that people are tracking these different opportunities that come out. If you're not on the list already, you can go to the website and you can get on the list so that whenever one of these new announcement comes out, especially in your area, you can be aware that these announcements are coming out. So Office of Sponsor Programs does that as well. Talked about the pre-proposal piece. Again, that's a piece that's, it doesn't happen with every DoD proposal, but the majority of them, they do have a pre-proposal. Keep in mind that this is different than just a letter of intent. Sometimes the NIH will have a letter of intent, which basically is who's the PI, what's the institution, what's perhaps the title or the area that someone wants to work on. And you can write one of those in 5 or 10 minutes just so that they're aware of how many applications might be coming in, but there's really no peer or scientific review that's done of that. The pre-proposal for the DoD is really different than that. It's really, really important. It may be short, it may be 3 pages, for example, but it's really important to make sure you have a really strong pre-proposal because your opportunity to get invited for full proposal, it's really based on that pre-proposal that goes through. Okay, is this the switch point?
I think you're going to go ahead and do this one now.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You're the
okay,
wisdom
right.
there.
That's okay. We have a couple of points where we wanted to switch presenters here, and I wasn't sure. So the other piece is to not only understand the military culture, understand what kind of the needs are of the military, but be kind of tracking what Congress is interested in as well. And that's what comes out in these program announcements that come out. Each of the requests for application will have lots of details. So when you get one of those, you really want to read through it and get an idea about what is the identified research gap that's there. What is it that the DoD is interested in funding? And your particular area, your research idea, it may or may not fit with that. So it's really important to make sure that your area of expertise and what it is that you're wanting to be submitting towards really fits with what the overall congressional purpose is for this. The military relevance piece, again, it varies from project to project. Most of the work that I do, and I think a lot of the opportunities we have here in San Antonio, there's a lot of direct military relevance to the research that's done. So the more you can link that to the DoD. I've had investigators in the past that were interested in doing research with diabetes, for example, and wanted to do a research study here at the Health Science Center, had a good track record of research here in town, and at the time didn't even realize that the DoD Center of Excellence for Diabetes, it's right here in San Antonio. It's at Wilford Hall Ambulatory Surgical Center. So if you're wanting to do diabetes research within the military, why not partner with the Center of Excellence for the whole DoD right here? Same thing with hearing disorders. We have a Center of Excellence for hearing disorders, many other areas of expertise that are right here in town. If that's what's important to the DoD, and if there's expertise locally, obviously partnering with those individuals is going to give you a much stronger research application. Military terms, you're a military city USA. So if you don't understand the culture, I mean, there's lots of things you can do. Obviously, it's being involved in meetings and talking with individuals. If you are going to scientific conferences again in the future, depending on what your area is, it's easy to spot those individuals that are in the military. They're usually wearing a uniform. And so if they're at your conference and they're wearing a uniform, talk with them. Where are they from? What kind of work are they doing? It might be that they're doing work in your area, or if not, they might know someone else that's doing work in your area. And that's one of the other ways that you can kind of connect with individuals to help increase the military relevance of your research. There's an example of some of the details of a recent program announcement that's out. We actually applied to this one. This was within the chronic pain management research program. So you can see this is an example of one of the things that's evaluated, which is the military relevance piece of it. And for this project, it really was important to be partnering with the military. In this case, we've partnered with the Defense Health Agency, leaders in the area of pain management. We've actually got experts in a couple of big medical centers that have lots of expertise in what's called functional restoration for chronic pain. And then we've identified 6 sites across the DoD, for example, that are interested in potentially collaborating on the project. This is what's called a dissemination and implementation trial, where the real idea is, if the science has been developed, there's some clinical programs, what's the best way to then see if we can disseminate the results of this research within the DoD, and not just within the DoD. Many of you have heard that it takes many years before the results of a particular study really get into clinical practice. The DoD, for example, there's many other obstacles that might get involved in that. So kind of working through, how would you get some good science, some good clinical practice into the military? The military is very interested in that, and there's a whole area of science that's related to that. Again, military partners, I think Dr. Hepburn will talk more about ways to identify a variety of military partners, or to seek assistance if you need help with identifying military partners. There's a variety of opportunities for doing that. And again, San Antonio, I think, is a great location to do that. There are mentoring opportunities that are available. So here at the Health Science Center, we have many individuals that are retired military, that are prior service military, that are continuing to collaborate with the military, but lots of expertise here. There is a new faculty associate program where there's individuals that have specific expertise in the area that are available to work with you depending on your area of research or area of expertise to help with that. And then opportunity for a formal grant review whereby you can have someone that actually goes through the drafts of your grant early on and provide some specific feedback for you. Okay. Now we switch. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Peterson. That was outstanding. And as you can tell, Dr. Peterson has a deep toolkit in the DoD funded research space, but he and his colleagues in the Strong Start Consortium are outstanding partners here in San Antonio and really helping to move our ecosystem forward. So what we've talked about up to this point is Dr. Wright gave you a little bit of a background about our military culture. What is the military culture and how important it is to understand that when you're doing these grants, understand the focus areas for that DoD work. And then Dr. Peterson just gave you a great high-level summary of what's available out there in the way of the CDMRP and the operational medicine research opportunities, the process and how different it is from the NIH, but how we're going to help you with that. And that's what I'd like to talk about now is how can the Military Health Institute help you navigate this process? So the first thing is we have a lot of de facto teaming going on here in San Antonio. Our trauma surgeons, for example, have a trauma think tank, and they meet monthly with our military and VA partners, the Institute of Surgical Research, the Naval Medical Research Unit, the 59th Medical Wing, and our VA colleagues just co-located with us at the Audie Murphy VA. So there's a great example in the trauma space of how that collaboration is taking place. Recently, our Mays Cancer Center approached the MHI about how can we collaborate with our clinical trials with our Army and Air Force colleagues over at the Brooke Army Medical Center. So we facilitated that meeting, and right now they are hardwired to make sure that they can do clinical trials together as we mature our new hospital that'll be coming up in the years ahead. It'll be fantastic for our military and their families to have that collaboration. Dr. Peterson talked about how important infectious disease is, and we know that that is a great opportunity. There will always be DoD funding appropriately in the infectious disease world. Whether it be vaccine development, wound therapies and preventing serious infections of open wounds. It goes on in infectious disease in other countries where we put our men and women in harm's way. For example, malaria research is a great example of that. That will always be around, that we need to make sure we do that. A great example of that partnering was Dr. Gupta, who just submitted a grant proposal. Working with our Army and Air Force colleagues over at BAMC and infectious disease that we facilitated that. And then Dr. Sharma, one of our leads our nephrology efforts, is working closely with the Uniformed Services University up in Bethesda, Maryland on a really leading edge filter for pathogens, and they call the SARA filter, as an example of partnering with the military on a device that is out there that will save lives, not only during this pandemic, but in infectious disease conditions in the future. Now, Dr. Peterson brought it up, but we now have, through the Military Health Institute, a faculty associate program. What does that mean? We have faculty that have a deep toolkit in DoD research. They understand it very well, and we've purposely selected members from all the schools of the university. This discussion today isn't just for the School of Medicine. We certainly want to nurture DoD research in the School of Dentistry, Nursing, and the allied health professions. So those faculty associates have actively committed to being mentors for our entire university. So that'll be a great tool. And we have some military partners in that faculty associate program too. And that program will grow in the months and years ahead. We certainly want to do that for our university. Dr. Peterson talked about the review process, and Dr. Romas, our Dean of our School of Medicine, has supported us in this. We had our initial review of a grant by Dr. Gupta. Dr. Stacy Young McCoggin reviewed one of those grant proposals very professionally, And we'll do that more and more in the months and years ahead. We'll take time to sit down with one of these faculty associates, review your proposal, and give you constructive feedback on how to make it stronger and more successful when you submit it up to Fort Detrick or wherever it's coming from. The letters of endorsement are also very helpful. Why would I recommend you have the MHI provide a letter of endorsement, particularly for somebody that is not familiar with the DoD space? We make a key point in these letters to say that should there be any difficulty in moving forward with the research, the MHI will be there to help. Now, a team like the Strong Star team that is hardwired with Fort Hood up in Colleen and so forth, they may not need these letters, but for those of you that are new to the DoD space, this is also very helpful to show the university's commitment to make sure that this DoD funded research is going to be successful as it goes through the actual execution phase of the DoD grant. So please reach out to us. We're honored to do that. We'll help you with that letter of support, and it certainly will give that little icing on the cake when you submit that proposal to the DoD. Hopefully we're going to come out of this pandemic sooner than later, and hopefully not in the not too distant future, but the MHI pre-COVID, we had a number of great networking events where you could start to meet collaborators and partners. A great example is the Distinguished Lecture Series that we have. We had the previous director of the Defense Health Agency here, Dr. Bono, pre-pandemic, and we anticipate on 1 February, the current director of the Defense Health Agency coming here to San Antonio, to our university, Dr. Place, Ron Place. And so that'll be a great opportunity to meet military collaborators in a reception environment, and certainly also hear some great words from the distinguished lecture speaker. So that's one of them. Just so you know, and many of you that are watching this may be actually on that DoD quarterly research meeting, but we meet quarterly with all the associate deans for research from each school, and also the VPR, and our rep from the VA as well, to go over the DoD grant opportunities, how we're doing as a university vis-a-vis DoD grants, and our opportunities for the future. So we meet quarterly to make sure that we're marching together, moving forward together as a team here at UT Health San Antonio. One of the things we're proud to do too is to nurture in our students from all our schools, military health and military medicine and military health interest group. And some of these students have done research over at the ISR, Institute of Surgical Research, for example, for their summer rotations. And we want to nurture that activity more and more in the years ahead, where our students, when they have elective time, can do military relevant research. And that makes them more competitive for their DoD when they will go for their GME selection for their residencies in orthopedics, dermatology, for example, and so forth. Some great networking events, and I hope this year we won't have to do it virtually. We have what's called the SURF, and that's an acronym, but it's basically San Antonio Military Health System, and our universities here in San Antonio meet every June over at UTSA, and it's a great mini military health research meeting. Last 2 years, because of COVID, we've had it done virtually, and it's gone very well, but hope we'll be able to do it in person this year in June over at UTSA. The granddaddy military health research meeting is the MHSRS, that one at the bottom left there, and that is usually conducted in Florida in August. And for our faculty that will be presenting either plenary or podium presentations or their actual research poster presentations, the MHI does have money to help fund some of that travel cost to go to that meeting. And let's hope that this August, coming up 22, again, we'll be able to do that in person. But that is a great meeting. Of all the meetings that you could attend to get an awareness of DoD research, I would encourage you to think about somebody from your team going to the MHSRS, Military Health System Research Symposium. And we can walk you through that as we get more information this winter and this spring about that meeting. I would, as Dr. Peterson mentioned, make sure you sign up so it's on autopilot, if you will, the grants.gov, or you can go to that CDMRP website, pick your area of interest. Let's say I'm doing, as Dr. Peterson mentioned, autism research, whatever it is. breast cancer research, you will get automatically sent any of those program announcements. It's great. And you can also go to grants.gov. That's always out there. One thing we didn't talk about already is broad area and agency announcements, BAAs. And those are out there too. So if you have a very innovative idea or a concept for research, particularly if it has great timely military relevance, let's say in the last year or 2 years, you've had a concept about an antiviral therapy that may be really efficacious against COVID, for example. Those broad agency announcements are suited for that, where you can throw out a line in the water and they will respond to you about their interest in actually moving forward with an application for that. So think about those as well. The mechanism you're going to use to submit is called the EBREP, and we'll do a deeper dive on that program in future workshops. That's our SharePoint for the MHI, and we keep the current announcements on there updated. And so you can please, if you don't want to wade through the grants.gov or the CDMRP site, you can go to the MHI SharePoint site, and we'll have the current open announcements for the DoD grants. And then, like we said before, don't be afraid to ask for help. We're here to help you, and certainly that's our mission as an MHI, is to make sure we support all the schools, all the centers, and all the institutes of the university with this DoD's research. And we will, as part of that, we're going to find an associate to help review your grants and help you through that complex process. Here's some additional information. We'll have more of these workshops. We had planned in the new year, later in the winter or spring, to have a deeper dive workshop with Dr. Peterson and colleagues to give some of the more detailed information about applying for a grant, to give you even more success in your application. Anyway, so there are some key links there. You can go ahead and allude to them. We didn't talk about DARPA, but DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And they are really they're charged with doing very leading edge, innovative, transformational research for the military. A great topic in that area was like rapid vaccine development. How do you rapidly develop a vaccine? They've been working on that for over 20 years. And here's a great example of this in the last 2 years of how important that kind of thing is. We will have, as an example, emerging infectious diseases that we'll have to rapidly respond to globally as well as nationally. And there's an example of an agency that's doing that type of research. They've also done some really innovative work in how do you move a patient with remotely piloted vehicles, an injured soldier, a Marine, safely. And the medical research that needs to go with that is significant. How do you have monitors and so forth? So an agency like DARPA does that, and you can go there and see what kind of innovative things they're doing about that. But just as mentioned, you can spend some really good time on a Sunday afternoon just going to the CDMRP website, the MRDC, Military Research and Development Command website, and they have a lot of great videos, short videos, 10-minute videos that won't take up too much of your time to explain this process, to make it more understandable for you, and to give you updates on this research. We're here to help, and I hope that did provide you some information to get you interested in DoD research. Please consider it. It will round out your professional portfolio, and it should be very rewarding work. You know, many of us have served in the military, many of you haven't, but I tell you what, when you engage with the military and the VA, you'll appreciate the sacrifices made by our men and women in uniform, and really will be charged and motivated to do this research for our nation and for our colleagues around the world. Really, this is an international discussion too for allies as well as our United States of America. So please contact me, Byron Hepburn, or Dr. Wright, or certainly Dr. Peterson, and we will connect you with our faculty associates to help you through this journey. So have a great year ahead. Thanks for joining us today. And please share this recording with your colleagues so that they can move forward in this research area as well. God bless you all. Take care.